Sky Fallen. Chapter 1. Beasts in the Night. Everything changed when the sky fell. When the great ball of fire came hurtling down from the heavens, Queen Hawthorne summoned every mage from every corner of the land in a desperate attempt to defy death itself. They saved half the kingdom that day, but the cost was all magic in the land. And with the death of magic, something new was born. Creatures from ash and flame. The Fallen. That was more than 100 years ago. Today, slaying the Fallen is simply the way of life for those strong enough to survive it. The Knights of Celes belong to monsters now. Between roaming beasts, bandits, and the desperate souls pushed to madness after the fall, Queen Hawthorne II had long ago enacted a mandatory curfew across the kingdom. What's left of it? Once the sun vanished, only slayers and fools walked the roads. Most nights it was hard to tell the difference. Far to the west, beyond the tree line and the broken hills, the burnout glowed beneath the night sky. Even from this distance, Feydric Moor could see it. Thin streaks of orange fire danced across the horizon like dying embers refusing to fade. Some nights the flames rose higher than others, almost like entire forests burned somewhere deep within the ruined lands. No one truly knew what caused the fires. Some claimed the ground itself still burned from the fall. Others believed the fallen gathered around ancient cities, now swallowed by ash. Feydric did not care enough to wonder anymore. Above the burnout hung the moon. Full. Always full. Since the fall, no man, woman, or child in Celes had ever seen anything else. And somehow, it never seemed to move far from the burnout itself. It lingered there every night, enormous and pale, behind drifting ash clouds, stained orange-red, like something burning beneath its skin. Feydric spat into the dirt. "Another horny noble who can't get it up," he muttered to himself, tightening his grip on Star. "And here I am, fighting two Garni for their bones." The two beasts paced around him through the trees, large, black, silent. Their amber eyes glowed in the darkness, while bone-like spikes jutted from their backs and shoulders. Long, tusk-like fangs curled from their jaws as they circled him carefully, searching for weakness. Garni hunted in packs. That was what made them dangerous. Get one alone, and it was manageable. Two meant trouble. Three meant death. Feydric stood just over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and thick arms hardened by nearly a decade of fighting. A drinking belly pushed against the front of his chain shirt beneath the long black coat he wore, though no amount of ale had softened the strength in his body. His scalp was shaved smooth, but his beard had grown thick and uneven over the years. His light brown eyes stayed fixed on the creatures. Even drunk, Feydric's instincts remained sharp. That was the only reason he was still alive. 5 years of mandatory slayer training. 4 more surviving as a dead man. No guild. No band. No brothers watching his back. Just him and Star. The hammer pike rested heavily in his hands, worn steel darkened by age and blood. The hooked spike at its head caught the moonlight, while the leather grip bore years of repairs and fresh wrapping layered atop old scars in the material. The legacy of the Moor family. The Garni in front lowered its body slightly. Feydric saw the movement instantly. He reached into his coat and hurled a powder grenade. The small iron sphere struck the beast square in the shoulder before exploding with a violent pop. Thick gray powder burst outward in a cloud, coating the creature's face and dulling its senses instantly. The second Garni charged from behind. Feydric heard it before he saw it. Claws tore through dirt as the beast lunged. Without turning, Feydric threw himself sideways, just as the creature flew past him and crashed directly into its blinded companion. Both beasts snarled and snapped wildly at one another. Feydric moved immediately. He charged forward with Star raised overhead and leapt. the spike of the hammer buried deep into the skull of the nearest Garni with a sickening crack. The beast shrieked. Hot black blood sprayed across Feydric's coat as the wounded creature lashed out desperately. Claws slammed into Feydric's raised left arm. The impact rattled through the iron bracer, and pauldron strapped across his shoulder. But the force still sent him flying backward into a tree hard enough to knock the breath from his lungs. Pain shot through his ribs. Feydric coughed violently and slid down the trunk. That's one way to sober up. The wounded Garni staggered several steps before collapsing into the dirt, twitching weakly as strength left its body. The second beast recovered quickly, too quickly, its amber eyes locked onto Feydric with naked fury the moment it saw its fallen packmate. Then it charged. Feydric rolled aside just before the Garni slammed into the tree where he had been sitting seconds earlier. Deep claw marks carved through the bark with terrifying ease. Feydric tightened his jaw. Too close. The beast turned immediately and charged again. This time, Feydric rushed forward to meet it. At the last second, he dropped low and slid across the dirt, swinging Star outward. The hooked head smashed into the Garni's front legs and ripped them out from beneath it. The beast crashed violently into another tree with a sharp yelp. Feydric rose slowly, breathing heavily as he approached. A wounded beast was always the most dangerous. The Garni tried to rise. Tried. As Feydric stepped within reach, the creature lunged one final time, jaws snapping toward his throat. Feydric caught its bite against the thick grip of Star. Its teeth scraped steel inches from his face. With a grunt, Feydric drove his boot into the creature's throat. The Garni gagged and loosened its bite, just long enough for Feydric to wrench the weapon free and swing. The hammer connected with the side of the beast's skull with a brutal crunch. The Garni collapsed instantly. But not before its claws raked across Feydric's stomach one last time. The impact staggered him backward. Feydric looked down at the torn coat and the deep scratches carved into the chain shirt beneath. Then the forest went quiet. Too quiet. Feydric's eyes narrowed. Somewhere deep within the darkness of the woods, beyond the trees and drifting ash, he thought he heard something. Chapter 2. Beasts in Dreams. Feydric stumbled into the Black Rose, with the first light of morning creeping over Long Reach. The village was only beginning to wake. Thin rays of sunlight slipped through the fog rolling in from Hawthorne Bay, while stable boys dragged feed buckets through muddy streets, and fishermen prepared their boats down by the docks. Inside the Rose, the air smelled of smoke, cheap perfume, and old liquor. Darla was already awake behind the bar, wiping down cups with a rag over one shoulder. Her long red hair had been tied loosely behind her head, though several curls had escaped and framed her freckled face. When she finally looked up, her green eyes narrowed. "You're a mess." Feydric smirked tiredly. "My darling Rose," he greeted, Star resting across his shoulder. He always called her Rose because of her hair. Darla rolled her eyes as Feydric dropped 3 heavy pouches of silver onto the counter. The clinking drew her attention immediately. Her expression shifted as she looked down at the coin. Part contempt, part admiration. She knew enough about slayers to understand what silver like this meant. Blood. Pain. Luck. Mostly luck. And Feydric Moore was no ordinary slayer. Dead men rarely lived long. Darla looked back up at him with the same expression she sometimes gave wounded dogs left outside during winter storms. "You smell like a corpse," she muttered. Feydric set Star carefully against the bar before reaching for a bottle of brandy himself. "I'll be upstairs." "You need to eat something," Darla called after him. Feydric only waved a hand as he climbed the stairs. The far room at the end of the hall had been his for over 2 years now. Inside, Feydric peeled away layers of armor between swallows of brandy. His coat hit the floor first, then the iron pauldron, then the bracer. Finally, he pulled the chain shirt over his head with a grunt and examined the damage. One of the Garni claws had punched through the rings and carved a shallow cut across his stomach. Damn mutt. Steam drifted from the bathing tub waiting near the corner of the room. Darla already had it prepared. She always did. Feydric lowered himself slowly into the hot water with a long, exhausted sigh. The warmth stung immediately. Black blood mixed into the water around him in thin, swirling ribbons. Every slayer was taught the same lesson young: clean fallen blood fast, or risk fever, or worse. Nobody knew exactly what lived in the black blood, only that leaving it on the skin too long could rot a man from the inside out. So Feydric scrubbed hard enough to leave his dark skin red beneath the grime and dried blood. By the time he finished, the room spun slightly. Maybe too much brandy, too little sleep. Normal enough. He collapsed onto the bed, still damp, and was asleep within minutes. Phaedra! The voice echoed through darkness. Take your brother and run to the lookout. Send the guild! Feydric twisted violently beneath the blankets, sweat soaking through the sheets. I can fight too, father! No, child! Go! The dream shifted. Moonlight. Screaming. Black blood. His mother crying out. Mother! Look out! The sound tore from Feydric's throat as he suddenly jolted awake. He sat upright, gasping. Sunlight flooded the room as Darla pulled open the curtains one by one. Dust drifted through the beams of light. You were yelling again, she said quietly. Feydric wiped sweat from his shaved head and tried to steady his breathing. Darla continued moving around the room casually. I had your coat patched, she said. Cleaned the chain, too. She glanced toward him. And I stitched the cut on your stomach while you were passed out. Feydric looked down at the bandage stretched across his belly. I also had the smith's boy take Star for repairs. That finally got his attention. You let someone touch my hammer? He's a smith, not a thief. She tossed his trousers onto the bed. Put something on. Nora's downstairs waiting. Feydric stood slowly from the bed. His body ached from the night before. As Darla bent near the dresser gathering his armor straps, Feydric's eyes lingered on her a moment longer than they should have. Her dress hugged tightly against her figure, beneath the apron tied around her waist. Darla noticed his arousal immediately. She straightened slowly before walking toward him with a knowing smirk. You slayers are all the same after surviving a hunt, she teased softly. She placed a hand briefly against his chest, before pushing the trousers into his hands. Your friend is waiting. Feydric grunted something unintelligible and pulled the pants on. Heavy footsteps echoed down the stairs moments later. Feydric Moore. The cheerful voice instantly softened something in him. Nora nearly ran across the room. Hello, Nora. The young woman wrapped her arms around him without hesitation. Feydric hugged her tightly and kissed the top of her blonde hair. For a brief moment, the nightmares faded. Nora and her mother were all that remained of his old life in Morgan Village. The little girl he once carried through the woods in terror was nearly grown now, and somehow already wearing Slayer colors. Purple band around her arm, one gold stripe, training rank. Feydric frowned slightly at the sight. Not that he could stop her. Nobody could stop anyone from becoming a Slayer anymore. Not in Celes. I can't stay long, Nora said as she pulled back. I have to return to Hawthorne Watch before nightfall. Then walk with me to the smith. The midday streets of Long Reach buzzed with life. Merchants shouted from market stalls, while horses clattered across stone roads, pulling wagons filled with grain and salted fish. The smell of seawater mixed with forge smoke drifting through the village. Feydric walked beside Nora slowly. How goes training? Nora smiled proudly. I'm getting better every day with the hawthorn bow. Feydric glanced toward her. She had grown stronger since the last time he saw her. More muscle in her shoulders now. Better posture, too. A real Slayer's posture. He hated noticing it, because Slayers didn't live long. Both his parents had been Slayers. His sister, too. Nora's father had died the same night. All of them stayed behind to fight, while Feydric ran with Nora through the woods toward Hawthorne Lookout. The memory still clawed at him every night. Nora stepped closer and sniffed dramatically. "You still smell like brandy." "It's medicinal," she laughed. Then her expression softened. "No matter how much you drown yourself," she said quietly, "the dreams won't stop until you accept what happened that night." Feydric said nothing. The forge came into view ahead. Heat rolled from the open doorway. Before entering, Feydric pulled a small pouch from his coat and handed it to her. "For your mother." Nora tucked it carefully into her saddlebag. "She wants to see you soon." Feydric grunted. Nora mounted her horse and smirked down at him. "If that belly gets any larger, I'll expect twins." Feydric gave her a tired glare as she laughed and rode off down the street. He watched her disappear into the crowd.